This meeting is being recorded.
All right. All right. So here we go. Okay. All right. So here's our agenda for September 2023, my friends. We're going to have some announcements, and then Brian's going to give his talk on was Sherlock Holmes a Freemason, and then we'll have our hopefully lively, as usual, discussion of Brian's talk, okay? And be interesting to see what people think, okay? It always is. All right, so announcements. So here's our first big announcement, and it's kind of perfect that Brian's one of the speakers here because Brian and I are pleased to announce that Belanger Books has started an academic imprint. And here we go. The press is titled Polestar Press. And while it isn't just Doyle-centered, some of you will know that the title was taken from Doyle's ghost story, The Captain of the Polestar. And for this imprint, it's going to be academic. So what makes it that way? It's the work is of a scholarly level. Most likely what we're publishing was written by a PhD. Submissions also follow the academic review process. At the least, they are peer-reviewed, and optimally, they are double-blind peer-reviewed. And we currently have 2 publications in the work. One is a website that's going to be put into book form titled Non-Tuberculosis Mycobacteria, a monograph for providers, patients, and researchers by Dr. Ed Chan, which is a book to help patients suffering from non-tuberculosis mycobacteria have an easier understanding of the disease and its treatment. And Ed's been working with the the medical community on this for a while now, and it's almost ready. He's still having some additional reviews being done on the website version of it, but the next step is going to be printing it and giving it out to patients across America. So that's really exciting. And then we also have the literary fiction book Groundswell from Dr. Eric Fetz, professor and chair of the Peace and Justice Studies Department at Regis University. And USA Today bestselling author Carter Wilson called the book a satisfying story of loss and redemption that immerses the reader in the beauty and mystery of New Zealand. Groundswell will be available in November with a Kickstarter for the project launching in a few weeks. And Dr. Chan's monograph is currently on the NTM Physicians website and will be published in print form by Polestar Press sometime in 2024. Now, Doyleans and Sherlockians might not be too interested in that. But the next thing we've got, the other big announcement you guys will be interested in, because it is our honor to announce that we are the publisher of the Conan Doyle Review. Okay, we are working right now with Dr. Ashley Polasek. She's a BSI, in case you didn't know, and she's a doctor, and she has created a review, and she had actually started it out in 2020, but it was held back because of the pandemic. But now it's back, and we're making a big push this weekend to announce it, as is she, and it should be up on the ACDS website as well. And the aim of the journal is to publish rigorous scholarship on the life and literary output of Arthur Conan Doyle. You can have essays on Holmes, you just cannot play the game with this. It has to be scholarly, okay? The journal is double-blind reviewed and is currently accepting submissions on their website. You do an online search for Conan Doyle Review, it comes right up, so check it out. Articles are published online after they've been peer-reviewed and probably, revised at least once. And then at the end of this year, our goal is to, and annually, is we will collect and publish in journal form the articles from that particular year. So we're very excited to announce that. If any of you are more academically inclined, and again, it is double-blind peer-reviewed, it would count toward tenure. Definitely check out the Conan Doyle Review. It's pretty exciting, and we really look forward to working with Ashley on this endeavor. All right. Now, I open it up to all of you, as I always do now. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute to see everyone. Does anybody else have any announcements for the group at this point in time? All right, if you do, just unmute. Well, usually someone's got something. Well, I had said it earlier, but a congratulations to Anna Behrens, who is elected as Percy Phelps for the Beacon Society. So it's really good.
Thanks, Derek.
Yes. Okay.
One thing I just want to say before we move on is that with Polestar Press and Conan Doyle Review, yesterday was the 8-year anniversary for Belanger Books, so it is well timed. I'm looking back at what we're doing. It's like, wow, we're coming along. We've come a long way, and we're just moving forward. This is great. So thank you to everyone who writes for us, edits, reads our stuff. We appreciate it.
And I saw Edith had a question in the chat. How are you defining peers for the Conan Doyle Review? It is other professors that are reading it. Dr. Polasek has compiled a group of reviewers. And if you're interested in being a reviewer, I think you can go to the website and just let her know. So that's how it is. And then they take the submission, it's sent to a reviewer with no name on it. So it's blind reviewed, and then they read it and send back feedback. So that's the process. Yeah, academia sure is interesting. Their process. All right. So let's get to the talk then. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. And I have to say, I had so much fun picking out the pictures for this one. All right. There's my brother in his many faces of Brian Belanger. Oh, all right. Oh, that was just, I can only do that because I'm his brother.
I'll get you for this, man. I'll get you for this.
All right, Brian Belanger, PSI, is a publisher, illustrator, graphic designer, editor, voice actor, and author. In 2015, he co-founded Belanger Books Publishing Company along with me. His illustrations have appeared in the Essential Sherlock Holmes series, McDougal Twins with Sherlock Holmes series, and Scones and Bones on Baker Street. He also had some illustrations in Dr. Ed Chan's manuscript that I just talked about there too. Brian has published a number of Sherlock Holmes anthologies and novels through Belanger Books, as well as new editions of August Derleth's classic Solar Ponds Mysteries. Brian continues to design all of the covers for Belanger Books, and since 2016, he has designed the majority of book covers for MX Publishing as well. In 2019, Brian received his investiture in the PSI and Sir Ronald Duveen. More recently, he created the logo for the Arthur Conan Doyle Society and designed the Great Game of Sherlock Holmes card game. In July 2022, and you can see this in that corner with him in the red suspenders there, he played Sherlock Holmes on stage in Yes, Virginia, There Is a Sherlock Holmes and Sherlock Holmes Goes West. Brian has been narrating Belanger Books audio releases since April 2023. All right. Let's give a virtual round of applause for our speaker of the day, Brian.
Yay.
All right. Can you, do you have the share screen already on? You still have it?
I do not think I do.
It should be able to share. I have it on. Just click on that button.
How do I? Okay, my PowerPoint is taking up my entire screen. How do I get off of this?
Hit escape Brian's technically challenged, in case you didn't.
There we go. Okay, so what, slideshow?
Well, now you want to go down to the bottom where it says share screen and click that button, my friend, unless you want me to run the PowerPoint.
No. Oh, share screen.
There you go. Click on your PowerPoint. Hey, we got it.
You are screen sharing.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Now go to slideshow and put play from start, and then you're on, my friend.
And
yeah,
there it is.
There you go. All right, I'm going to mute myself, and you've got the show.
All right. Well, this was a topic that I thought of when Derek and I were in London earlier this year. And it turns out that this is a topic that has been covered many times before, but I'm still going to go ahead with my own take on it. And I hope you all enjoy and learn something. So, was Sherlock Holmes a Freemason? An old topic with a new spin. My main purpose for this talk is to determine, first of all, what exactly is a Freemason? Was Sherlock Holmes a Freemason? Assuming he was, why didn't Doyle just say so? Assuming he was, well then who inducted him and into which lodge? Or where did he go for meetings? And finally, well, what about Watson? Was he a Freemason? So, that said, what is a Freemason? That is not the scouting checklist there. This is actually a little older than that. According to the United Grand Lodge of England, quote, Freemasonry is a society of men concerned with moral and spiritual values. Its members are taught its precepts, its moral lessons and self-knowledge by a series of ritual dramas, a progression of allegorical two-part plays which are learned by heart and performed within each lodge, which follow ancient forms and use stonemasons' customs and tools as allegorical guides. Freemasonry instills in its members a moral and ethical approach to life. It seeks to reinforce thoughtfulness for others, kindness in the community, honesty in business, courtesy in society, and fairness in all things. Members are urged to regard the interests of family as paramount. But importantly, Freemasonry also teaches and practices concern for people, care for the less fortunate, and help for those in need. Now, Britannica.com states that, quote, Freemasonry is the largest worldwide secret society. How they can track the membership of secret societies, they do not explain. Although they do say that, quote, secret societies do not necessarily conceal their membership or existence, which makes no sense to me, but there you go. Britannica goes on to say that Freemasonry was spread by the advance of the British Empire. It remains most popular in the British Isles and in other countries originally within the empire. So where you see those Union Jacks, you see. So, was Holmes a Freemason? Although there's nothing in the canon that says Holmes is a Freemason, there's nothing that suggests he isn't one either. I'm leaning towards yes. Here's why. First and foremost, Doyle was a Freemason. That is Arthur Conan Doyle's apron right there. You can see. Few facts. In January 26, 1887, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was initiated into Freemasonry as a member of the Phoenix Lodge in Portsmouth at the age of 27. In 1889, he resigned from the Phoenix Lodge, but he remained a Freemason. On April 5th, 1900, during the Boer War in South Africa, Doyle attended a meeting at Rising Star Lodge at Bloemfontein, I hope I pronounced that right, with Brother Rudyard Kipling. As we know from Anna's talk earlier, Doyle and Kipling were friends. On March 23rd, 1901, Doyle accepted honorary membership in the Lodge of Edinburgh in commemoration of his return to England after his globetrotting. In 1902, Doyle rejoined the Phoenix Lodge. On January 25th, 1905, Doyle accepted honorary membership into another Edinburgh lodge, Lodge Canongate Kilwinning. And finally, in 1911, Doyle resigned from the Phoenix Lodge for the second time. In all his years as a Freemason, he never progressed beyond the third degree in the craft. Now, speaking personally as a former Mason myself, attaining your first 3 degrees does not take that long. It can be done as quickly as 90 days in some lodges. Doyle, being as active as he was, a world traveler, my theory is that he just didn't have the time or the inclination to advance any further. But enough of all that. Getting back to Holmes, how does he fit the bill? Well, it's a few things. First of all, to be a Mason, you must be of good character. So despite his treatment of Charles Augustus Milverton's maid, Sherlock Holmes can be said to be, overall, of good character. You must have a belief in God. From going down to the chapel that they talk about in the Gloria Scott for his university days, all the way through his mention of God's own wind on the eve of World War I, the canon is rife with mentions of Holmes's lifelong faith in God. He doesn't necessarily belong to any particular religion, but this goes along with Masonry's rule. It doesn't matter what religion you are, so long as you have some sort of belief in God. You must offer assistance to those in need. I think we can all agree Sherlock Holmes is not in it for the money. He makes his detective services available to all classes of society, implying that he charges his clients according to their ability to pay him rather than his talk of using a fixed rate. For example, he is very generous with his irregulars. He probably provides them with their only income. He's just got to know. This is Sherlock Holmes we're talking about. Someone with Holmes's insatiable curiosity would naturally be attracted to Freemasonry. There were so many Masons in British society at the time, Holmes would have to investigate them in order to learn what they're all about. And what better way to learn about them than to become one of them? Finally, connections. Freemasons look out for each other. Many of Holmes's cases come to him by way of referrals. It would be natural for fellow Freemasons to refer clients to him. This would have been appealing to Holmes, especially when he was first starting out as a consulting detective and needed clients. Not only that, Holmes's Masonic connections possibly attracted royal clients who would rather work with a fellow Mason who they believed they could trust rather than expose their secrets to the police or government officials. Okay, get your waders on for this one. An early example of Holmes's Freemasonry. At the time of A Study in Scarlet, Holmes couldn't afford a room on his own, and he was actively looking for a flatmate. When Holmes was introduced to Watson, it is possible he tried to determine if Watson was also a Freemason because a fellow Mason would be more inclined to help him out. The first thing that Holmes and Watson do when they meet at Bart's, they don't just shake hands. The scene reads, quote, "How are you?" he said cordially, gripping my hand. Masonic handshakes are known as grips. The type of grip one uses not only identifies one Mason to another, but it tells what their ranking is. Also during that first meeting, Holmes is talking about some criminal cases and he casually mentions blah, 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 and Mason of Bradford. A possible hint to size up Watson's reaction? Well, if Holmes was a Freemason, why didn't Doyle just say so? Because Freemasonry, although widespread, is still a secret society. Technically, they're not supposed to advertise the fact that they're Masons. Many Masons, however, like Jabez Wilson in the Red-Headed League, disregard this rule. Quote, "And the Freemasonry? I won't insult your intelligence by telling you how I read that, especially as, rather against the strict rules of your order, you use an arc and compass breastpin." Also, Doyle was a Freemason, but as we said, he never had bothered to advance too highly in the ranks, and he quit his lodge twice. So this tells me while he might have been a member, he wasn't all that active in his lodge, and he didn't see any reason to write Holmes as being that way either. Well, if Holmes was a Freemason, then who sponsored his membership? Who brought him into the fold? Mycroft. Oh, I'm sorry. This guy here, Mycroft. For Mycroft Holmes to have such a strong influence in the back it up there, for Mycroft to have such a strong influence in the British government during the Victorian era, it is highly likely that he was a Freemason. Freemasonry spiked in popularity in the second half of the 19th century, and Freemasons were very common in the British government. His Royal Highness Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, eldest son of Queen Victoria, was installed as Grand Master of the Freemasons of England in 1874 and served in that capacity until 1901 when he became Edward VII. Taking over from Albert Edward was his brother, His Royal Highness Arthur, Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, third son of Queen Victoria. He served until 1939. So between these two gentlemen, they ran all masonry in England throughout the entire run of the canon, and then some. Other highly placed government officials that Mycroft probably knew of were colonial governors Sir Hercules Robinson and Lord Carrington, secretaries of state Sir Michael Hicks Beach and his predecessor, the 4th Earl of Carnarvon, Dr. William Withy Gull, royal physician to Prince Edward, and Sir Charles Warren, police commissioner during the Jack the Ripper murders. Also, in Freemasonry, family members often induct the new generation into their lodges. It is possible that Mycroft was a Freemason and inducted his younger brother Sherlock into his lodge. So, where would they have gone for their lodge meetings? Both of the Holmes brothers would have had to make a special trip over to Freemasons' Hall at 60 Great Street in London, Great Queen Street in London. This building is the headquarters of the United Grand Lodge of England, and even in Victorian times, the hall was used by several lodges throughout London. The way it worked is, instead of having a Masonic hall on every other street, the lodges would just go to this central location on a rotating basis. It's not too far from Simpson's in the Strand, so you know both Holmes brothers had no problem going to that area. Now, it is a shame because in 1977, the Mark Mason's Hall moved in just around the corner from Pall Mall at 86 St. James Street. That's right down the road from Mycroft. He would have loved to have just walked a block or two rather than take a coach for a mile and a half. But I digress. What kind of Freemason would Holmes have been? Sherlock Holmes is a relatively solitary individual. I think it's likely that although I can see him adhering to the moral obligations of Freemasonry, I believe he would have been a lodge member in name only. He would have paid his dues. He would have attended the occasional meeting out of obligation, like the Catholic who would go to church on Christmas and Easter, that sort of thing. Mycroft, on the other hand, would likely have been right at home. I can easily see Mycroft treating his lodge like another men's club of the well-connected and his co-workers. So, what about Watson? As far as I can tell, there is nothing in the canon that suggests Watson was ever a Freemason. Certainly not before he met Holmes. The way he describes his circumstances at the beginning of A Study in Scarlet, once he's back in England, those are the descriptions of a lonely, desperate man. He says, "I had neither kith nor kin in England. I led a comfortless, meaningless existence. When he finally runs into Stamford, he is thrilled. Quote, the sight of a friendly face in the great wilderness of London is a pleasant thing indeed for a lonely man." These are not the statements that Watson would make if he could walk into any Masonic hall in London to receive financial help and a friendly community. Now, it is possible that Holmes inducted Watson into his lodge once they got to know each other. However, I find this unlikely. Holmes would belong to his lodge only through his relationship to Mycroft, not because he's sociable or he wants to hobnob with high-ranking members of the government. Also, as I've said earlier, Holmes probably didn't attend many meetings. He's not very outgoing, so why bring Watson into this? It took years for Holmes to bring Watson to the Diogenes Club, and even then, we're never explicitly told that Holmes is a member. They only go there because Holmes knows that Mycroft's going to be there and they can talk in the stranger's room. So, in conclusion, I believe that there is at least circumstantial evidence to suggest that Sherlock Holmes and his brother Mycroft were Freemasons, but there's just not enough evidence to include Dr. Watson. Questions, comments, threats, and petitions?
I have a comment.
All right, so you can, I think Tom Burns and Margie and Larry had their hands up, and oh, I see Walter as well.
Okay,
right,
who's
so
first
let's
here?
go in that order to start with.
Okay.
Tom, I think you're up first.
Okay, I'd like to ask Brian, how do you reconcile Holmes as a Mason, given his dislike, or I might even say contempt, of spiritualism and maybe even spirituality?
Because again, I see Holmes doing this more out of Mycroft would have brought him into the fold, more likely to help him gain some clients at the beginning of his career. Because again, Holmes didn't move in with Watson because he wanted to. He needed a roommate. He was broke. So being connected with the Masons, I think, would have been a financial thing. It would have been a favor to Mycroft, or Mycroft would have considered it a favor to him. And as far as the spirituality, again, speaking as a former Mason myself, there's not a lot of religion or spirituality as long as you believe in God, which is pretty explicitly stated in the canon that Holmes does have a belief in God. Yeah, I don't see any issue with it.
Okay. Why not room with a Mason?
Because he probably just hadn't run into one yet. He had just mentioned it to Stanford that morning, and Stanford's like, whoa, he runs into Watson. It's just perfect timing.
All right, Margie.
Okay, I just have a silly question, kind of. So you were talking about, the king was the Grand Mason. Pardon my language. I didn't retain what you called his title. Were other royalty in the other houses of Europe also Masons that we know
of? I believe so. The research is certainly out there. And again, it would certainly explain why Holmes was accepted by royalty so easily.
The reason I asked him, the first thing that popped in my head for some reason was when he refuses to shake the hand of the King of Bohemia. Well, we all know that the King of Bohemia is a rat and that he just walked off, which I'm glad he didn't shake the hand of a rat. But when you were talking about the handshakes having meaning,
yes.
And so if he knew this guy was a Mason, it might have something to do with he just wasn't willing to shake the man's hand, considering he certainly was not keeping up with the standards that the Masons would have set. Okay, that's all I have.
Exactly. And that brings up a good point. He might not have wanted to shake hands because he's like, oh, he's going to know I'm just a first or second degree.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Larry.
Okay, well, a couple of things is I don't know that much about Freemasons, but I know that a lot of the founding fathers of this country were Freemasons. And in fact, a lot of the ideas that went into the Declaration of Independence and even the Constitution all came from Freemasons kind of progressive philosophies and esoteric kind of ideas about democracy and fairness and freedom. You know, freedom was a radical idea in those days because people just lived under kings. That was just the way it was, and the kings said what we're going to do, and that was it. But and a lot of this country comes from a lot of the philosophy that was talked about in among Freemasons, I think. And what else do I want to say? I like what you said about the secret organizations. Like, what's the definition of a secret organization? Reminds me of a Get Smart episode where he says to them, the FBI isn't and the CIA aren't really secret organizations because everybody knows about them. But control, nobody's ever heard of control. We're really a secret organization. But I think that that secret I think there are secret organizations that know about their existence, but their ways are secret. Access to what they do in their meetings is secret. I think that's probably more of a definition of secret organization rather than that nobody's ever heard of them or understands them or anything like that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. I'm gonna change topics a little bit. So,
you reminded me of one of my favorite authors, Robert Anton Wilson. When he was researching his historical Illuminatus series, he said he was looking up information on the secrets of the Masons and the Masonic word. The Masonic word, such a sacred, holy, secretive phrase. It took him a whole 20 minutes in a public library to find out what it was. It's like
it's secret, but it's not secret. It's
exactly.
But I also like what Tom said about spiritualism, that Holmes was a spiritual guy. I think we can say that because remember his speech about the Rose and the Naval Treaty and other places. He does have a spiritual now, but spiritualism he doesn't believe in. He doesn't believe in ghosts and that sort of thing. So because in those days spirituality, if you use the word spiritualism, you're talking about ghosts. We don't when we talk about spiritualism today, we're talking more about just the belief in one universe, in one in a designed universe, let's say, that what happened by accident. But because that's like a spiritual guy, believes in destiny and that sort of thing. But in those days, spiritualism meant ghosts, and Holmes did not believe in ghosts. But I don't think you have to believe in ghosts to be a Mason. You just have some kind of God or higher power.
Yeah, not when I was there, albeit briefly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, Walter.
I would sit with my grandfather in Centennial Lodge on Montview Boulevard, if it is still there. I don't know if it is, but only on the day that he was going to go pay his dues. He would only go to Lodge once a year and pay his dues. And that was how it was done so many years ago. And for such a long time, you could remain an active Mason as long as you paid your dues and you came once a year or maybe once every other year. And I thought that was very interesting. And I can see how Sherlock Holmes might just go once a year. And as far as Conan Doyle, he probably just demitted from that one lodge, and he was members of other lodges. So he just didn't want to pay that extra money that went to his Edinburgh lodge, maybe, I don't know. But that's all I have to say. And wonderful talk. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Shayna, and then Anna.
Hi, a couple things. One, like part of the title of your talk was like an old question and a new spin. So are there like previous articles or presentations people have done on this question? Like, are there like specific people that you were agreeing with or disagreeing with? Did you do that kind of research?
Well, first of all, I found out that there's a lot of papers and talks out there as far as Masonic themes in the canon. Like that was the big thing. And so I was like, I don't want to cover this again. This is something that anybody can look up with Google. I was more interested in the thought of, I'll bet Mycroft had to be a Mason. And if Mycroft was a Mason, I'll bet he was just like, younger brother, please just come to the Masonic meeting with me. I'll make you a Mason and get you some clients. And that way you won't starve and make me look bad. So that was sort of my thing. There were a few papers out there that I actually avoided because I'm like, I just want to do my own take on this. But I believe there was I saw 2 that said he was a Mason and 1 that said he couldn't have been a Mason. And I'm like, that's great. I will do my own take on this.
And my other thing is, I thought of this while Larry was talking, the idea of a secret society that everyone knows about. Are you familiar with the McElroy brothers, the podcasters?
No.
They have a show called My Brother, and Me. And at one point they had some kind of, I don't know if it was an actual television show or just a streaming show, but there's one clip that you can find online where it's the 3 brothers and they're sitting in a car and they're calling people up on the phone in order to get in touch first with the Masons and then with the Knights Templar. And they're talking to these people on the phone and just watching these 3 guys react to kind of working their way up through this hierarchy is to, excuse me, yes, hi, I'm interested in becoming a member of the Knights Templar. What are the requirements for that?
Yeah, well, there's actually an ad campaign a few years ago that the Masons had saying, want to know what a Mason is? Ask one. I'm like, well, that's not very secret now, is it? No. That's called desperate for membership.
All right, Anna.
So, hey, Brian, I'm wondering about, all the doctors who were Masons, Freemasons, and why you would think that Dr. Watson wouldn't then be one, being a doctor.
Using the canon as a guide, I didn't see anything in there to suggest that he was. I certainly think he could have been later in life, especially, I hate to say this, but once his writings about Holmes took off, that would have made him a very attractive prospect, because the Masons do like to flaunt, go after the connected and the clubbable, as they like to put it. So it's certainly within the realm of possibility, but going through the canon, I just didn't see anything that suggested he was.
I would imagine that if he were a Freemason, that he would actually move up and be a higher rank than Sherlock, because Sherlock probably didn't do any of the things he needed to do to move up, which would be sort of funny.
Exactly. And I'll bet he rubbed his face in
it. All right. Sandy has a question.
Just a quick suggestion. Perhaps Watson joined as a Mason after Holmes retired, because then he could go to meetings, be with his friends, make more friends, and so forth. And that is the reason why he didn't have time to keep running down to Holmes, because he had now a new circle of friends that he made through the Masons or some other organization.
Yep, I can definitely see that. This is one of the reasons why I actually cut back some of the parts of my talk. I'm like, I just want to see what people are going to say about this. So yeah, that's a great, I could easily see that. Who's
all
up?
Right, Brian, I got one for you.
Yes.
I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit with some conspiracy theory stuff.
Oh, please do.
So, obviously there is this, you mentioned Dr. Gall at the beginning as one of the famous Masons of the time period. And there's There's definitely a conspiracy theory that he was Jack the Ripper. There's even a conspiracy theory that Doyle was Jack the Ripper. If Holmes was part of a lodge, could this explain why he was never investigating the Jack the Ripper case?
No, because I don't think that he cared enough about being a Mason to listen to what they had to tell him. If one of the head Masons said, look, as if you can't go after our fellow Mason, I just don't see Sherlock Holmes listening to that. I see him just blowing that right off.
I would probably agree with you on that.
Yeah. But I could see, if assuming Gull or another high-ranking Mason was Jack the Ripper, I can see the Masons saying, Brother Sherlock, why don't you go over to Baskerville Hall for a little while? Or when are you going to be out of the country? Using their knowledge of Holmes to sort of dance around him.
Yeah. Walter.
Could he have joined the Masons because he thought there was a possibility that Jack the Ripper was a Mason? Ha ha. And as you know, as your brother certainly knows, supposedly the highest you can get, even though you might be a master or something like that, is just that 3rd degree. So supposedly, so he might have just joined, as I say, to find out if the bad guy was a Mason, and probably found out that he wasn't.
I'm going to disagree, because I think that if Holmes was a Mason, I think he would have joined prior to the events of A Study in Scarlet, which is, so we're talking 1880, and the Ripper killings didn't happen until September of 88.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I have a question.
Sure.
Why would we want to live in a world where Sherlock is a Freemason versus a world where he isn't a Freemason?
I don't think it's a question of wanting to live in a world where he is versus he isn't. I think it's what would be a fun talk for a Saturday afternoon.
But still, I send you the question to ponder. Or anyone to ponder, I guess.
Yeah. I don't think wanting to live in that world is necessarily a thing. I don't think it enhances the enjoyment of the canon anymore if you think of him as a Mason than not. I just think that it's something that there's at least some circumstantial evidence in the canon to suggest that this is possible.
Tom, and then Larry again.
Okay, not to belabor this, but looking at the two men, Holmes and Watson.
Yeah.
I see Watson much more the Masonic type. I mean, he goes to the club to play billiards with Thurston. He is, affable. And Holmes is, as you said, solitary. And in some cases, I think that might be a kind description. Sometimes I think he actively fights misanthropy. But, I just see Watson as more involved with that sort of thing. Yeah, I could even see, you have a point about Mycroft, but I could even see Watson trying to get Holmes to become a Mason, just simply because it seemed like Watson was always doing things to get Holmes out of his shell and, worried about the drugs and all that. So that's just a different way of looking at it, I suppose.
If that's the case, then again, I think there's definitely a case to be made that Watson was could possibly have been a Mason later on. I don't think that when they first met, Watson was, because the way he's describing his circumstances, and especially I was all set to be like, I'll bet he joined up the Masons in Afghanistan, and I'm like reading this going, no, he didn't. And when he got back, so it would have had to have been after the two of them were living together, or possibly after they stopped living together. Yeah.
Okay, Larry?
Okay, well, the thing is, just to what you were just saying, it's true. Holmes, I think, even once said that Watson was his only friend, and so you think of Masons, they all have like sort of friendships and ways in and ways out, and I mean, I understand that aspect of the character, but the evidence for me is that Holmes seems to know about Masonry. I mean, he recognized Jabez Wilson's pin, and he recognized, I think, somebody on somebody else's keychain or something in some other story. I mean, he knew the Masons. He knew what the rules of the Masons were, because he repealed him to Jabez Wilson. So he at least knew about it and knew about the subject. I also just wanted to share one more other thing about this is that I live in Denver, and in Denver there are at least 2 Mason lodges that I drive by on a regular basis. And there was one I used to go to when I first retired. I used to go to a lot of talks at the Colorado History Museum, and at one point, though, they decided to tear down the Colorado History Museum and build it anew a few blocks away. And so that they wanted to keep having this, wanted to keep having their having these monthly talks, the monthly history talks. And so they had them in a Masonry lodge down in Denver, in downtown Denver. And so I got to go into one and sort of like nose around a little bit, because I was kind of curious. And boy, they had pictures of presidents and all these high-ranking people, that were members. That's one of the things that really impressed me there. And so I don't know, it's just interesting being in a Mason lodge. It's the only time I've ever been able to find myself, getting into them. And the other thing about what Trevor was saying about do we like the idea of Holmes being a Mason? Do we want to live in that world? Well, it depends if you believe in the Masonic beliefs. If you believe in if you like people that believe what the Masons believe in, then you might want to think that Sherlock Holmes was that kind of a guy, and maybe he had an understanding of like I said before, of the idea of freedom and maybe because he certainly didn't have a lot of respect for the caste system. He really he trusted he thought a Baker Street regular kid's word was as good as a king's word, and he didn't talk down to different classes. In fact, he would put on disguises and join them and fit right in. So it depends. I don't know enough about Masonic beliefs per se, but and like you say, the Masonry themes in the canon would be interesting to explore.
Yeah. Hey, Edith.
It was interesting hearing Larry's take on a visit to a Masonic temple. We have one here in Montreal, and they do an open house every year. And I went one year with a few friends, and I was in opposite measure. I was underimpressed because there seems to be just a very strong emphasis on things like rules and tradition, but the materials were very poor in quality, and there was like a strong emphasis on aligning the building with the cardinal directions, and yet the building was not on those angles, and that seemed to sort of encapsulate the entire experience of that particular lodge. So I would love to get a contrasting experience, because it was really kind of it was surprising to me how much seemed a little off. Everything seemed to be a little off. But I also wanted to say, in response to the idea that Sherlock Holmes would have joined the Masons to learn about the Masons, I think that is the last thing that Sherlock Holmes would have done. I think he would have been tickled by the idea of learning Masonic secrets, not by being taught by Masons. I think he would have found that the worst possible way to learn their secrets. I think he would want to have picked it up on the streets or by fooling people or, by disguising himself or doing something like that.
Or the library.
Or the library. And the other thing is, he doesn't like powerful people necessarily. People who are connected, who sort of team up together to sort of maintain their wealth. These are not the people that Sherlock Holmes likes or respects. So I don't see him as a Mason. Watson to me is much more of the Masonic character. He's a more clubbable man, I think. Anyway, that's my take.
I will say, getting back to what you first were saying about that lodge, different lodges have different quality. Let's just put it that way. Full disclosure, I was briefly a Mason myself. Derek and I have some Masons in our family history, and I was heartbroken because I did my research and I'm like, this is going to be fun. And when I was being taught here's what you're going to have to know for the meeting next Saturday, it would last about 5 minutes. And then they were like, I bet you'd really like to sell Amway product. And it broke my heart. And then they condensed 2 of the second and third degree. So it each should be taking hours to install a psychological impact of the lessons. And it was like, lay on the ground, give me your hand. Okay, you've been risen from the dead. Congratulations, your third degree. And I'm like, and then they're like, now here's where you can send your checks. And that's why I am not a Mason anymore. But I have friends who are Masons or very happy to be Masons, and they're like, you got a bad deal. So it depends on the lodge, really.
All right, Anna, you get the last word.
Okay, well, if anyone's looking for a wonderful lodge to see, I would suggest the one in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. That's where all the Masons went. And that's where they have George Washington's Masonic apron in there. I mean, all the founding fathers, I think with the exception of Adams, were Masons. And it's right next to City Hall. And they say there is a tunnel underneath that connects the 2 buildings. And I think almost every mayor of Philadelphia has been a Mason, with just a couple of exceptions. So, and it's just a gorgeous building and well worth it, the tour. They do offer tours.
Okay, let's give a virtual round of applause to Brian for a wonderful talk and a wonderful discussion, everyone. This was a great topic and a great day. All right. Before we go, next month, I'm going to share my screen again just for a second. I'm going to be talking, and my topic is about the adventure of the misquoted Macbeth, because I was selected by Immortals and by Otto Penzler to be in the best mystery stories of the year. And so I'll talk a little about that. I just thought it was a good opportunity. The book comes out officially in September on the 19th, so soon. And I do have, oops, hold on a second. I do have my author copy here. I don't know if it's kind of weird with my background, but there it is. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk a little about Shakespeare as well, because Shakespeare is very important to the story and the connection between Sherlock Holmes and Shakespeare, and even Doyle and Shakespeare. and also just how my brain works and how this story came about. So I just thought it was a good opportunity. So that will be the discussion in October. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Brian, again. I thought this was a great meeting. And for those of you in America, happy Labor Day weekend. Enjoy your extra day off of work. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you in October.